Hey there, welcome to the fourth episode of this Koala Sampler tutorial series, and in today's episode what I want to do is just kind of deep dive into the settings menu. So if we go to this little ladder icon in the top right hand corner here, scroll all the way down to settings, and then we can open it up. I'm going to skip over to the first tab here. We've got 4 tabs across the top, and we're looking at the general tab first. We've got one shot enabled by default. I have that set up because I just found every time I brought a sample onto one of my pads, generally, I found I was just manually always putting it into one-shot mode, so that just saves me a little bit of time. Hold to record, I'm going to demonstrate for you. So if we just click OK and come out of this for a second. So when I press a pad here, if I just press it, it will record a little bit. Now, I've got it set to resample, so it's not going to record anything at the moment. But if I just hold it for a second and then stop, it's already recorded. Now, if that was set to the mic or there was something to resample, we would have some audio here. Now, what the other option is that you press and hold, and then you will notice we get a little option here. Now I can push up and set this to record without me needing to put my finger on it. So again, 2 ways to record, both with their sort of uses. Let's just stop that. Now, if we go back into settings and I turn this off and come back in, what now happens is that when I just tap a pad, it will be set to record. So if I just tap it, we can see that it's recording and it won't stop until I tap it again. And we can do it that way. Now, there's a couple of issues with that. First thing being that, of course, if you start trying to play any sequences and things, you're just going to set off a bunch of pads to record. So it's not useful in that instance. And also, when I'm kind of working and I'm playing around with stuff, I'm just pretty clumsy. So I just find I occasionally just tap a pad by accident and I've set it off recording. So that situation, it's no good for me. So I usually have that set like this. There are obviously reasons that you could use it like that. Let's say you were going to record somebody's vocal in, or you were going to do something into the app. It's kind of useful to be able to just do like the one tap record, but of course you can just come into the settings and change that at any point. So let's go back here for a second. So next we got count in. Pretty obvious, but it's just a counting before you start recording anything, particularly in like sequencer mode. I like to have 1 bar, so it's kind of like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it begins to record. We can set this to none if you don't want any, and we can set it to do 2 bars if you'd like a little bit longer on that. The next option here is pitch knob snap to semitone. I have that set on, and again, I'll do a little demonstration with that. Now that we've got a couple of things loaded onto the pads, you can see we get a few extra options up here. And in another video, I'm going to go into the edit mode and talk about all of the good stuff in there. But for now, let's just have a little look at this pitch knob. And as we pull it, you can see it does snap to the semitone. Now, for my general use, I think that's perfectly fine. Normally, I can get a sample to get like pitched correctly and sort of blended into whatever I'm doing just using that. But if I find that I'm struggling and I need some like really fine pitch on here, then we just go into the settings and we turn this off. And now you'll see that we get these really small, fine increments so that we can pitch things with more accuracy, I suppose. But as a general rule, I have it set to on. Enable audio share just means that I can use the audio share app, which is a really cool app. And at some point when I show you more about bringing samples in, I'll talk a little bit about that app in more detail. But I have that enabled because it is my go-to sort of like file organization system on my iPad for audio files. And when this is enabled, whenever I sample something or import to my pads, that's what brings up, that's the menu that comes up. It allows me to access all my audio share files. If you don't have that enabled and you import something to a pad, it will probably just open the like iPad files application, so you can just skip through your files and find WAV files that way. So I have that set to 1. Then we've got warn before delete samples and sequences. Again, pretty obvious there, but it is just going to do that if I accidentally drag something towards the bin or go to delete something. It just gives me a warning to say that I'm doing it. I keep it turned on because sometimes I'm a bit clumsy and I pull something, and yeah, it's kind of useful to have. So let's skip over to the audio tab. Top one is input source USB only, and that is so if we're recording something in like a vinyl record or something, we can choose the channel that we want. So we could just have the left channel, the right, or left and right. As a default, I always have it set to left and right because I usually want something in stereo, and if I want to turn it into a mono file, I can do that inside of this app. That's pretty useful. Background audio, I have to admit, that's a complete mystery as to what that does. I can't find anything online for it. It's not in the Koala help section thing, and there isn't a Koala manual that breaks down things by the name. So if anyone can leave a thing in the comments about what that does, that would be handy, because I've got no idea. I've had it turned off and turned on. Doesn't seem to make any difference. Inter-app audio sync, I have that enabled because sometimes I want to use Koala with like a host application like Orm or something like that. And it just allows everything to be synced up. I can set the tempo in one app and then use another one and just have everything linked together. So that I have set on. Pocket Operator, sync out. I don't use Pocket Operators, I don't own one, but apparently you can sync them up to this, which is pretty cool. Metronome volume just is what it is. This little bit of in and out information here just tells us about like our channels that are available. Auto trim on record I have set to 1, and what that does is it just trims off some of the fat when you're recording things, like some like bits of excess audio or silence that you don't need. That's quite useful. Then the MIDI settings here, we can enable MIDI velocity, which I don't have set at the moment, just because I've been finding I do a lot of my sort of velocity changes inside of the sequencer sort of manually. But if we have that set, we can play really lightly on our screen, or we can play heavier and it will give us those velocity changes and the sort of changes in volume. So bear that one in mind. Use MIDI mapping, that's currently set to on because I've got a controller set up, and there's going to be a separate video on mapping MIDI where I'll show you actually setting up a controller. If we turn this off, you can see there's a couple of just sort of general settings here. So we've got the MIDI channel that we can set, and of course we can choose from a bunch there, and we can do like a MIDI note offset. Now sometimes that does come in handy because Koala's a little sensitive about its like MIDI information, and everything has to be kind of in a set order. So sometimes I've had to like remap a controller to get it to work, and the note offset can sometimes come in handy for that. But we'll talk more about that in the MIDI episode. I'm just going to put this back on. If we click the map MIDI button, I'll just show you that really quickly. Everything that's MIDI mappable lights up in green, and we can go through our different pages. So all of this stuff you could like map to a controller, and then if we just click stop mapping, we'll do that. So back to settings again. What have we got next? We've got Ableton Link. So yeah, I'm not going to explain everything about Ableton Link, but know that if you own a copy of Ableton, you can link the two bits of software essentially, which gives you some functionality, and you can link with other iPads and all kinds of stuff, which is kind of cool if you're like a bit of a jam session or something. Bluetooth MIDI, again, pretty self-explanatory, but if you've got a Bluetooth controller, some sort of MIDI controller, you can connect it via this. I don't have one, so I've never tried it. I don't know about the latency or anything like that. But yeah, it's a pretty useful feature. MIDI can select pads. All of these I don't have turned on at the moment because I haven't really found any great need for them. However, if you turn MIDI can select pads on, when I'm on my MIDI controller, as I flick through the pads, I can basically just select the pad that I'm working on via the Koala app. I'm sure there's uses for that, but I've just never really needed it. MIDI can record pads does the same. I could press on my MIDI controller and set off a pad to record, but normally I just do it on the screen, so I haven't really needed it. External MIDI clock sync, again, is the same thing. You can sync to an external MIDI clock. I don't really need to do any of that kind of thing, so I don't bother using it. Then the last tab we've got here is extras. So we've got this show Mutant Solo, and I think when I did the user interface video, I did talk about that, and I said that if you can't see the Mutant Solo buttons, which are at the bottom left-hand corner here, just make sure that that's turned on. As I said, I don't really know why you would ever turn them off. But perhaps there is a reason. I keep them turned on. Our background here, that is the little, I've got this little NPC skin that I created here to make it look like an old NPC. That is just where you can change that, and it's simply a case of just bringing in any other JPEG image. You can have something that's on there. So let's go back to settings and look at that for a second. I could remove mine, or I can choose a new one. And I think if I do remove, it gives me the option to upload a new one. I don't want to remove this one at the moment, but I could do if I wanted to change my background. Now, we've got this background effect thing here. Again, I've never really had any call to use it, but I'll show you if we choose it. gives us the options to apply some like kind of trippy effects to our background here. So at the moment we've got this set to none, but I could choose, I don't know, let's try kaleidoscope. And then if we change this, I don't know what num loops is particularly, I guess it's the number of loops, and then the speed, we can play around with the settings, but then when we press play, we get this constant sort of trippy visual background. I think it's a cool feature. I'm sure there's some people who would really love using that, but to me, it's just a bit of an eyesore, gets in the way when I'm trying to work, so I never really bother turning that on. But it's important to talk so that you know that it's there, because it might just be the kind of thing that you're really looking for. The one thing I did think when I said I didn't know what background audio was, I'm not sure what kind of files you can upload to that, and if you can upload a video file. I was curious whether this background audio would be audio from that video file that you upload, but then I don't really see why you'd want audio playing while you're trying to work, but who knows? It could be that. Again, if anyone knows, put it in the comments. Let's go back to extras. So we've got background effect, we've done. You've got choices for your export bit depth, so of course 16 or 24. Can, I'm assuming, save a little bit of like file size and stuff like that if you need to. I usually have mine set to 24, don't really see any great need. If I want to take a sample bit down, I can do that elsewhere. Gives us our Koala version. This is the Samurai version, so it has the add-on, and again I'll talk more about the add-ons when I get to that section, but it's just letting me know that I've paid the extra £2 or whatever it was for this ability to chop samples up. And then this stem splitter neural network is really clever. Now that is the ability to bring stems in and split stems, which I think I did mention in another video, but you can bring in whole songs, split them into the vocal, the drums, all that kind of stuff. Something that you would have to pay an external web service for usually, or if you use one of the web service things, they're kind of limited to like one song a day. So even if you're just looking for something that splits stems, for the money that this app costs, you could just buy this app and just split stems all day. There's no limitation. There's no length of song limitation that I've noticed so far. I've done some pretty long tracks with it. But yeah, you want to make your own remixes and do stuff like that, then yeah, super cool. It just gives you the ability to uninstall it. Again, not sure why you would, but it's an option that's there. So we can click this little about page at the bottom thing here, this little about button at the bottom. That will take us to the Koala web page, and it just gives us some information about the devs and people who've worked on the project. And of course, we can just hit OK to close out. So I think that'll do it for the settings menu. Hopefully that showed you everything you need to just get up and running with Koala, get your preferences set. Some of those things that I've said I've got set certain way, you might already be thinking, actually, yeah, I would change it and I would do it the other way. So hopefully it gives you that information. But it's cool to know your user interface, get to know the settings really well. Give us a good start as we're sort of moving forward in the next few videos. So hope you've enjoyed it. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.